Welcome to Queer on El Paso, episode 36, Quiénes Somos, Identity, Culture, and Queer El Paso.
Identity can be an interesting thing. We use words to describe who we are, where we come from, and where we belong, but most of us don't fit neatly into just one box. We carry a lot of different identities with us, and sometimes figuring out how they fit together is part of figuring out who we are.
Here in El Paso, many of us grew up with a pretty strong sense of what it means to be Chicano, Latino, or Mexican American. It's part of our families, our language, our food, our traditions, and simply part of living on the border. And for some of us, queer becomes part of that identity too.
We thought it would be interesting to talk about what happens in the space where those identities meet. Today, we're talking to the Borderlands historian and head of the Chicano Studies Department at the University of Texas at El Paso, Dr. Irma Victoria Montelongo, about being queer and Chicano, how each of those communities has shaped us, where we find belonging within them, and what it means to claim both as our own.
Irma, welcome to Queer on El Paso.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. To begin, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you identify, how you became interested in Chicano studies, and what brought you where we are today in terms of you're the head of the Chicano Studies program at UTEP, is that right? So tell us a little bit about that journey and your identity through that journey.
Okay. So, I identify as a Chicana, a lesbian, an El Pasoan, queer, I guess. I'm looking at these labels that you have here, and I'm like, all of the above.
Yeah, you check all the boxes.
I check all the boxes. And I guess to begin, how I became part of my identity of being a Chicana was with my parents. So I was born in 1963. I grew up in a family that was very much brown power at the time, the 60s, right? We boycotted grapes. We were very much, my parents were very much supporters of the Chicano movement throughout the 60s and the early 70s. And so that was infused in our lives at home, right? That we were Mexican Americans, that we were supposed to be very proud of our culture, of our names. Never allow anybody to pronounce your name in English, right?
An anglicized version.
Yeah. Always, and make sure that they learn how to pronounce your names. We spoke English and Spanish and Spanglish, and very typical, I think, Chicano home, very Catholic, very family oriented. We had grandmas and great grandmas and grandpas around all the time, and so just very embedded in our culture.
Is part of that environment that you grew up in, the Chicano environment, when did you first realize that you were lesbian, and how did that change that experience? And what age were you, and did that inform your adolescence, or was it later in life?
Well, I came out at about the age of 18. That's when I realized, but I think others realize much earlier, right?
Yeah, I know myself. I showed signs early.
Yeah, I think it was one of those things. What I've said before, the closet door was made of glass.
Oh, yeah.
So I grew up with two boys and two brothers, and I never wanted to do the girly thing. You know, I didn't like playing with dolls. I liked being outside with them. I was a tomboy. I liked playing basketball and baseball, and I would consider myself a late bloomer. I didn't really think about my sexuality.
Well, at 18 or so, I mean, we're talking about what, the 80s? Is that right? Is that about right?
So, yeah, I graduated high school at 18 in 1981.
I see. And a different world back then, but still a very interesting time in terms of what we know to be the Chicano movement in the late 70s. So you were really kind of in the middle of that.
I was. I think what happens, and I think what happened to my generation especially, was that by the time we're hitting the 1980s, we're kind of losing that political power that the Chicano movement brought about. right? So the Chicano movement brings about school walkouts and things like that, right? Because they're fighting for a presence. And it happens, right? UTEP has the first Chicano Studies program in the state of Texas, established in 1971.
Wow.
So all of this student movement and protest, it worked, right? We get Chicano studies, we get bilingual education, we get Mexican-American Chicano teachers, things that you never saw before. And then that power kind of starts to wane, right? Like we made it, right? There's no need to continue on.
Right. Is that what happened? Was there a sense of completion there?
Or maybe a sense of complacency, maybe not completion.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever completed. I think it's ongoing, but sometimes we get comfortable. And then that activism kind of wanes a little bit.
Irma, I think that's not unlike the LGBTQ struggle too, in that, that we in the 70s, the first gay pride marches and all of those different things and worked their way all up into the AIDS crisis. And then laws started to be passed and even things that were kind of a sort of negotiation, like don't ask, don't tell. We moved forward from that. We have gay marriage. And we started to live in this little bubble of these rights that we fought for. But we became complacent. And so look where we are today, in that those rights are being inched back in front of our very eyes. Is that also true in the Chicano movement?
Absolutely. And I think there's a parallel that's occurring, especially in states like Texas and Florida, where they're re-envisioning the curriculum of schools and higher education, especially, right? There's a lot. UT Austin, for example, is changing their curriculum, and they're trying to erase Latino studies and African American studies and women's studies, right? Texas Tech has done the same thing. In fact, I think they're being sued for that right now. Texas A&M has done the same thing. So if you think about it, there's a parallel between ethnic studies, ethnic identity, and LGBTQ identity, right? We see, maybe we all became complacent. And now you're seeing some of these new transgender laws that are sparking this
right and
pushback.
And it's been said before that perhaps that the shall I say prejudice has always been there and it remained there. It just became more sublimated. While it was in the public eye or in public opinion, it wasn't as popular. But it seems that the political times that we live in now gave a sort of an open door, a rise to being able to express this kind of and I hate using this phrase, anti-politically correct, because I don't even know what that means, but but the idea of the wokeness and that sort of thing, this anti-woke movement that really fueled some of this prejudice that we're living against today. Is that right?
Absolutely. This push against DEI, right? What they call DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So if you look at the LGBT community, it encompasses DEI, as does Chicano studies, Latino studies, women's studies, African American studies, and LGBTQ studies, right? So all of that is anathema to this this anti-DEI,
Right.
There's a push, and I think it's this white Christian nationalism.
I was just going to ask about that, about why do you think what is so threatening about DEI to especially some of our politicians?
Yeah, my guess would be that we are quickly becoming more prominent in American culture. So the demographics are changing, right? And there's a fear of losing power. I mean, racism is about power.
It absolutely is.
And so when you start to lose that power, I think, to me, this is a last-ditch effort to hold on to 250 years. Is our birthday 250 years?
Yeah.
250 years of power.
And it seems so that, that the ones that are holding on to power are strong holders, that they have the benefit of this generational kind of wealth, this generational kind of influence, but that's what's slowly eroding away. And by sheer numbers, Latinos are going to populate Caucasians in this country.
That's why we have to get rid of them.
And that's the fear, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's one of the fears. And then, but with that population comes economic power, political power. And so those are the kind of things that really cause fear to the people that are in quote unquote power now, I would assume.
Sometimes I go to the idea, remember there was fear of a black planet, but now we're having fear of a brown planet, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, and if you see the immigration procedures that we're witnessing every day, they literally are targeting a specific group of people, right?
So the conversation about Chicano identity is more important than ever, and kind of intermingling that with an LGBTQ experience, because we know that a lot of people in El Paso are of Latino, Hispanic, and I want to talk a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me in your mind what it is, because I know that there's no set definitions for any of these terms, but tell me your opinion. What is Chicano? And how does that relate to Latino, to Latinx, and all these different labels that we somehow... Okay, let me just also say that the gays come up with labels for everything and everybody.
Yes, they do.
When I grew up, there was gay men and lesbians. Now it's a whole alphabet. Now there's bears, there's otters, there's I don't even know what else, and I'm gay. So I want to talk a little bit about labels. Let's talk about that. I mean, because we put them on ourselves more than it seems in this day and age than people put on us. So tell us a little bit about one of the different types that and kind of the thinking that goes along with each of those.
Right. So Chicano, I think, has a political emphasis to it. When somebody identified as Chicano, and let me step back a little bit. If the word Chicano in the 1920s was actually derogatory, it meant like uncouth, not cultured, like, you know.
The implications they wanted
Apenas y elastes del rancho.
Right. But they wanted to make up
Is it too strong to say that it was similar to nigger for the black community?
No, I think it's more like similar to naco. Are you familiar with that?
Yes. For those that don't know, naco is somebody that's just uneducated, uncouth, unapproved.
That's what she's exactly what she's
Yeah. And so that's people who identified that way had that political passion, right? That they were activists, they were fighting and they were conscious, right? That they had been left out of the education system and out of, certain labor spaces and things like that. And so in the 60s, these young kids take a word that had historically been used to put down and they re-empower it. Like the word queer.
I was going to say, that's exactly like queer.
Right. So, and re-empower themselves by using that term, Chicano. We're Chicanos. You use this term to put people down. We're proud of who we are, right? So we're going to re-embrace this word. And that's I think, the definition of Chicano today in its simplest form. I think it means an ethnic Mexican born in the United States, right? Okay. I think that's how the youth today see it. The youth in the 60s and the 70s saw it as like a badge of activism, a badge of honor. Today, I think our youth sees it as an ethnic Mexican born in the U.S., born on this side of the border.
Perhaps not so politically charged.
Not so politically.
More an emphasis on the cultural history of Americans who of Mexican descent.
Right. For me personally, I always, because I grew up in that generation, I'm 57 years old, so I remember my brothers and sisters doing the walkouts in the 70s and the Chicano power and the bad and the armbands and the flags and all that sort of thing. And so in my mind, Chicanismo was always kind of shown that way. It was a political statement. And over the years, like most other things, it's kind of like transformed into more of a cultural identity. And one is celebrated, is what you're saying, more than an insult, as how it began.
And it was also a re-embracing of the indigenous past, right? To say that you were Chicano meant that you were conscious and aware of your indigenous past and not just your Spanish
colonial,
colonizing grandparent, great grandparents, but that you had indigenous blood as well, right?
and the part that makes us proud.
And that you were proud of that indigenous blood, right? Because we know the history of Native Americans as well. And so that we were not going to allow that half of us to be erased the way that Native Americans have been erased historically.
Interestingly enough, it seems to me that what happens in several ethnic groups, particularly as we are kind of becoming enveloped into another country like the United States, is that we kind of turn on each other a little bit, And so there is
Same thing for the queer community.
with being, yes, exactly my point. And so here, from Chicano, you're pocho if you're not brown enough, you're a coconut, or if you are se cree mucho porque se cree muy español, that sort of thing. And so, it's hard to find where you land in these things. And we as queer people do the same thing. Growing up, I remember kind of disrespecting really effeminate gay men because I'm a man and I'm a gay man and I don't want to be a woman, and going on and on. We go through all of these things to kind of this strata of who's better than somebody else. But really, it's just kind of what you're comfortable identifying as.
Yeah, I think that the term for that is intersectionality, right? We are made up of many, many, many identities, all of us, every single one of us. And I think we embrace our many different identities according to where we are at a certain moment, right?
That's true. It may be fluid even. It's a moving target, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fluid. It's never set in stone. Me, for example, right? I am an educator, I'm Catholic, I'm a Democrat, I'm a lesbian, depending where I'm at a particular moment, that's the identity that I embrace. And that's especially if I'm fighting.
Right.
Which is often.
Tell us
which is good.
I have a question to interject real quick. As far as the intersectionality, yes, it's kind of who we all are, but also it seems like, for lack of a better phrase, the anglicized population kind of preys on that. I don't want to call it a fault, but like those divisions to keep us from gathering and using, they all come together and like they're for the white power, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Ceci. It makes it seem like, do we strata, have a bit of
like
I need to say it's tarsed out so that we are weakened by those divisions,
Right.
What do I think of that?
Well, I think that white privilege has a lot to do that. They don't have to worry about that, right? They have a historical privilege where they have been able to go to school. They have been able to get jobs. They have been able to get mortgages, right? They don't have to define themselves in the many ways that people of color do. I mean, their system is established, and it has been established for hundreds of years. They just function within it.
Right.
We're on the outside trying to function within, and we have to figure out how to do that, right? So do I do that as Dr. Montelongo, right? Or do I do this as the Chicana lesbian? You tell me which one's going to get more traction. Right.
That's interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, and those type of different identities can serve as tools.
And that's intersectional. That's exactly what intersectionality gives us, right? It gives us the tool to deal with the situation at hand. Because, am I fighting a political battle at this moment, or am I fighting for medical care?
Mm-hmm.
Am I trying to land a job, right? Where am I at this particular moment that I have to reach into my identity toolbox? I know we are.
Yeah.
If you will.
Yeah.
To figure out how to confront this battle.
Right. Okay.
If I'm a white woman working within a white system, I don't think it matters. I think I walk in the door and then I'm just who I am.
and they start crying.
Right.
But before I start crying,
You get the job, right?
Okay, so continuing, I guess, with the Chicano, we've covered Chicano. Next, we've got Hispanic or Latino. Yeah.
So Hispanic is actually an imposed identity that is created in about 1976, right? So we're coming up on the census in 1980. And at this point, there has been a large influx of Latinos, right? From Cuba. You had the boat lifts, right? And then you had the dirty wars in Central America and Guatemala and in El Salvador and Honduras. And so you have a large influx of people escaping those wars. And so the Latino demographics has increased dramatically. And the federal government is trying to figure out how to count all these people. So it used to be limited to the border, right? To the U.S.-Mexico border. That's where you found the majority of Latinos, Mexicanos, Mexicans, Mexican-Americans. Easy to count. Maybe some in Chicago, right? Maybe some Puerto Ricans in New York. But now you have this huge influx that has sort of starting to saturate the country. And how do you count them? You can't put a box for each of them. That would make the census incredibly long.
And they'd have to have every country in South America.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, except for Brazil. Oh, right. Because they're Latinos, but they're not Hispanics.
Right.
So what they do then is they're going to group us all based on the Spanish language.
And that's
Hispanic.
That's what Hispanic means. So that was a government
Imposed
label just for terms of counting population. And we, as a community growing up in that era, I remember not really questioning it at the time. I mean, in retrospect, I did. A little bit of college education will tell you question that. But when you're a kid and they say, check Hispanic, okay, I'm Hispanic. It's very easy to adopt that identity because you don't really contemplate it very often when you're not an adult or you're not pursuing that kind of thing. So what does that do for the greater group if a large portion of Latinos, Chicanos, call ourselves Hispanic? Does that affect the overall culture?
I think it does. I think what happened was we wholeheartedly embraced it. The majority, without thinking about it, without questioning, right? Oh, you're Hispanics now. Okay, we're Hispanics, right? And that's where you start to lose the activism of the 60s and 70s, right? You don't have that same outlook of fighting for your rights or fighting for this. You're now one big happy family. You're Hispanics or Hispanics, as I say. Right?
Well, and as I was thinking about that just now, I was thinking that homogenizes, like milk, it homogenizes the group into this mix
and it allows us to feel seen without really typically being counted.
Yeah.
And it makes us feel like we're part of a group that we're really not part of because Puerto Ricans, so I was fortunate enough a few years back to teach a class that was connected to a Latino studies class in New York City. So we had the UTEP section and the John Jay College section. And the majority of those students were Dominican and Puerto Rican. And the majority of our students are ethnic Mexican. And I say ethnic Mexican because some are American citizens and some are not. And we have a large population that comes from Ciudad Juarez. And the discussions that would take off in that class were fascinating. The Puerto Ricans did not want to be associated with the Mexicans or the Dominicans whatsoever because they were not immigrants. They're citizens. They are. They're citizens. Right. The territory. Right. And they didn't want to be grouped because there could be the chance that they might be seen as undocumented when they're all documented. They can travel from the island to the mainland without any problems. And in fact, it's John Jay College of Criminal Justice, right, which is in my opinion, they were making a lot of cops is what they were doing. They were educating a lot of soon-to-be cops. A lot of the young men wanted to go to Border Patrol and come down here to patrol the border. Right. And I used to joke with them. I used to say, no, that's okay. We have enough Latinos down here policing us. We don't need any more. Right. And so and Dominicans are immigrants. Right. So amongst themselves, they were bantering about their identity. And then we come in, the undocumented. Right. And again, we're not a big, happy family. No matter what labels you put on us, we have our own internal divisions, and a lot of it is based on citizenship, right?
Interesting, because particularly Puerto Ricanos right now, while they're citizens, they certainly, in the current political climate, aren't even perceived as citizens anymore, it seems. And so
they're a colony.
Yeah, exactly.
In the old colonial sense.
Yes.
Right. And I think they're like 50% divided. 50% acknowledge that. They're like, we're a colony. And the other 50% are like, no, we're U.S. citizens. Yeah, we're U.S. citizens, right? It's odd.
And okay, so now we've covered a little bit about Hispanic and even the different variations within that. So now let's talk a little about Latino, Latina, Latinx.
So Latino, the difference there is Latino is somebody who hails from a Latin American country, which would be south of the U.S.-Mexico border, right? Those are all your Latinos with the exception. Well, no, the Brazilians are Latinos. Okay. Geographically.
Right. Okay.
They're not Hispanics, though.
Why?
Because they speak Portuguese, not Spanish.
They're not Spanish colonized.
That's interesting.
Yeah. They're Latinos, but they're not Hispanics. People from Spain are Hispanics, but not Latinos.
And the Portuguese are not Hispanic, right?
Right. They're not Hispanic
or Latinos.
They're Latinos.
They're Latinos.
The Portuguese are Latinos?
But from Portugal?
No, they're Europeans.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
From Portugal. Okay. Now we confused ourselves.
And me.
We've now covered about 635 different labels. And we're not even done yet.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. So Latino comes from Latin American countries.
It's more about geography.
Okay.
And Hispanic is more about language.
And that's a very easy way to understand it. My entire life, I've never been able to get a handle on it. And that right there is something that you can really take home. Let's talk a little bit about the progression to Latinx. I'm not even sure what that means.
Me either.
So the X represents non-binary.
Okay.
So when we say Latinx or Chicanx, we're using a term that encompasses everybody. Not so Latina and Latino is gendered.
Right, because of the Spanish language.
The A and the O.
Right. Versus, okay.
And so the person that is strongly holding on to the identity of Latinx is probably binary, non-binary. So they don't want to assign any gender to any of their identity.
Exactly. They, them.
And a few years ago, it really kind of took off, and I've seen it kind of wane. What is happening there?
So a lot of Latinos and Chicanos don't accept the X. They don't see it. There's a lot of reasons why they don't see it as grammatically correct. Again, another label that we're coming up with, right? So again, it's a matter of preference, I think.
Right.
And I always tell people that, like, don't start with me about this label or that label, because I think identity is fluid and people can identify however they want.
I think you said it just perfectly when you kind of, I think as human beings, we all kind of adopt, it's like an arsenal. We have in ourselves various identities. And depending on the situation, what is being called from of us, that we kind of wear that badge for the time being and for the appropriateness of what we're trying to do. And I certainly understand the people that are non-binary and wanting to do that, but certainly that is not all inclusive to something like Chicano or Latino, right?
Which also makes me think that there's an aversion to fluidity. I think that as human beings, we don't like having like a morass or a mystical soup of something. We want it defined.
Right.
We want
Which is-
it all in its
Is evident in all the labels.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we do tend to really kind of start to group people in the biggest groups available, gender being one of them, and without really recognizing that gender is also fluid and that there's a large portion of people in the middle, just like any spectrum. There's not any one, while a large majority of us are male or female, there's a percentage that aren't exactly that, or they don't identify that way. But yeah, we always tend to divide by the biggest groups first, and then we go down to the minuscule details of what it is that you do. Why is it important, though? Why are identities like that important?
To me, I think I think this might be an individual perspective, but to me, it's important for who I am mostly as an educator for the students that I am teaching and young people to see that it's okay to be me, and that it's okay to strive for whatever it is you want to do in this world and be you, right? Like, I have never hid my sexuality and has accomplished a significant amount of things. And for me, it's important that my nieces and nephews see that my students see that. So I embrace my identities, my labels. But more so, I think, for others than for me.
Because it's a form of acceptance, but because that's what we've been kind of socialized to be, accepted by people. Even in our subconscious, right? So it's like if we put up these labels, and like you said, for your students especially, I would think that they would see, like, okay, this is possible.
Yeah.
It's not a hindrance that I'm queer or whatever. I can still succeed.
I think that there's something to
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What do labels mean to you?
Well, I'll tell you what they mean to me, in that I like to know my own mind. I like to be able to say, I am, just like I say, I am 5'3". I'm
Well, I'm taller than you.
Yeah. All right. Our next guest.
That's a first.
I'm 5'3". And I go to these different things. I think that for me personally, I think that it's part of the human experience to become settled with who you are, who one is as a person. I would define that sense of identity within myself before I project it out. But in order to do that, I have to present and say, I have to come across those identities on my own and say, yes, not only am I a short man, I'm a short gay man, I'm a short Latino man. I'm a short Latino man who understands becoming Chicano. Yeah, the importance of Chicano. Yeah, being a Chicano. Going on and on and on. And so I think that it's important for self-identity more than acceptance from a greater group. But the interesting thing is that when you do that, you find your group. You find other people that identify in similar experiences. And so we become kind of part of a little bit more of a mass of people that are similarly identified. That's how I see it.
Yeah, but I wonder if we ever meet that point where we know who we are. Like, I am very different than I was 5 years ago. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to be extremely more different 5 years from now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do we keep searching?
I think it's an exercise of grace. I think that there's something to be said about us learning who we are as we go along, because we don't know who we are. Certainly, the young man that I was at 12, and Izzy can attest to this, is, well, I was the same height. I was not true. And I was not the same person. I have a friend who went on to write and study Chicano studies and has written several novels. But when we were in high school, he was the biggest pocho I'd ever met in my life, and I thought this guy was not proud of his heritage, and kind of said things that were kind of semi derogatory about our own people, and I kind of kept that in the back of my head. But I watched his journey, and I say, well, good for him. This is his journey, and he's sharing it with people, and that's kind of what I was talking about. That I think is where the strength is, in that we are constantly evolving and sharing how it is that we come across the idea of who we are.
Yeah, or maybe it's how we free ourselves to be who we are, right? Because I think you give this example of your friend, but how many of us, Izzy, how many people did you know that were homophobic that came out of the closet?
Oh yeah, tons, and of course, once they came out, you're like, I knew it, and and that kind of
That's
thing.
why you were homophobic.
Yeah, exactly. That, and then you gave me such a hard time, and that kind of thing. But later on, you realize that that their struggle was the same. They were just hiding it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but whereas some of us, like me, could not hide it. You could not hide it. You had to.
I want to interject something. Izzy, and I've said this before, we've been friends since we were in kindergarten, but there was a time where we were really, really close, and we grew up together in grade school, and then adolescence kind of snuck up on us, and it became very clear that Izzy was gay, but I wasn't, apparently. And so we separate. I intentionally separated myself from Izzy for a number of years because I was embarrassed, because I was afraid of being found out. And that is homophobia, really, And so I had kind of come through that. And now I understand it more, and I'm less judgmental of anybody, like even my friend who was now Mr. Chicano Power, but back then was like, oh, I don't speak Spanish, that sort of thing. And so you learn that those are the kind of things that we repel, or the kind of things that we're somehow more attracted to.
Which I think goes back to your idea, which I really love, is the idea of grace. We need to learn grace, to give each other grace, because we're not all growing at the same paces, and we're not all accepting things at the same paces. There's a lot of ideas around us that we are ingesting, not at the same stages of development and those kinds of things.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and so we need to afford grace for one another.
To that end, let's talk about sexuality. And I'm going to just kind of, for the purposes of the rest of our conversation, going to use Chicano and talk about the Chicano community. I think that we're all comfortable with that. And everybody sitting at this table certainly has grown up in a Chicano environment. How is the LGBTQ experience different? I can speak about our generation back in the 70s and 80s coming out, and it wasn't easy. There was a lot of homophobia, and a lot of it was kind of taught and learned behavior against gays and lesbians. And a lot of that was just, the society at the time. Things have changed. But are there any unique challenges that you think, that any cultural significance in terms of the challenges that we had coming out, as opposed to a generation or somebody coming out today within a Chicano environment?
I think one of the challenges is still religion. I think the Catholic religion is pretty oppressive. And then again, I think it just depends. So in my family, my mother was much more open-minded because her only brother was gay, but closeted gay. I'm talking about the 40s. And I mean, he married and had a couple of children, and then he left. Like, he moved to another city. He couldn't, to be anymore. Yeah, he couldn't take it anymore. And so she was much more open-minded than my father. My father was very kind. And so he didn't say ugly, derogatory things or anything like that. But I know that wasn't his frame of mind. He accepted his brother-in-law, and he fully accepted me and anyone around, but he was a straight heterosexual man. He was not ugly. On the flip side, I had friends who were thrown out of their house and even beat because whether they admitted it or not, Dad thought that was going on, right? So, and I think that the religion has a lot to do with that, right? You're supposed to marry, you're supposed to have a family. Depending on the time frame you're growing up, you're not even supposed to use birth control and things like that, right? I mean, to me, this Latinos for Trump, which I don't understand for the life of me. I don't
You and me both. You and me both.
But I think it has a lot to do with the pro-life movement.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a powerful thing. It's a powerful indoctrination. And I do feel like, again, giving all of us grace, I do feel that the Catholic Church, well, I think it is certainly responsible for a lot of problems. A lot of people find solace in it. So I don't want to seem so anti-Catholic. I just, again, finding grace. I learned at a young age that is not for me. That religion is not for me. And I'm okay with that. But my dad wasn't. And that's the other issue that I see in families is that, when you do start to not feel like the religion is serving who you are spiritually, it's very difficult to get out of it. It's kind of like a cult.
Yeah. Well, for me, no religion is okay. I'm spiritual. I think that's the important word, right? I'm spiritual. I will do anything I did it. I took care of my mother for 6 years before she passed away. I'd do anything for my siblings. I try to be a good neighbor, a good friend, a good colleague. All the things that you're supposed to do, right? That make you a good Christian. But I will not go to the church, right? So I'm not about organized religion, right? And I used to tell my mom that because she would be like, "Why don't you go to church with us?" And I'd be like, "Because they don't speak to me, Mom. They speak to you guys, to the family unit, to the mother, the father, the children." I said, they just don't speak to me. I live by the rules that you taught me through the church, but I don't need to go congregate with a whole bunch of people who are kind of looking down on me because they know who I am. And they're even wondering what I'm doing there, right? They're waiting for some big old lightning bolt to hit the church simply because I'm sitting in there, right?
Right.
Well, and I hear this, and I was thinking about this earlier because I was listening to, what's her name? Erica Kirk talk, and she was talking about the importance of procreating, and that's a big platform for them. And I think that's one of the weapons that they use. Again, and this is an irony.
Certainly the Catholics.
Yeah.
I mean, God knows you can't use birth control or have an abortion.
Yeah, and this is something that they weaponize against gay and queer people is because they're well, you're not going to procreate, you're not going to have. But then when we want to procreate,
that I've never had an abortion.
Yeah, well, that's true. Although you would have if
I would have had a frequent flyer.
Given your past, no. But that I think that there's that idea of you must procreate and stuff like that, and then when it comes to gay people wanting to have kids, they're like, oh no, we don't.
Point.
Yeah, we don't want you to have kids. And why is that? Isn't that a hypocrisy?
Right. And you can. Lesbians can give birth. There's being a lesbian doesn't mean that your reproductive system doesn't work, right? I mean, with the right test tube, right? They can give birth. But let me add a label to myself then, since we're talking about that, and that would be feminist.
Good.
I'm a feminist, and I am pro-choice because I fully understand that not all women have the same upbringing, and more importantly, the same support networks, right? So if I had become pregnant as a teenager, I would have had an incredible support system. I would not have had to have an abortion. My parents would have raised the child. They would have taken care of us and whatnot. Not every woman has that.
Right.
Right. And some women are literally homeless for whatever reason, drug addicted, etc. And we need to think about what bringing a child for that woman, but bringing a child into that into this world means. I cannot speak for all women, so it's absolutely situational.
And even further with religion and in terms of sexuality, a sexually active young woman who isn't married, well, that's just not acceptable, is it?
Yeah, and you would think that in this day and age that's still not an issue, but particularly it is. And I think the people sitting around this table certainly live in a little bit of a bubble, but there are so extremely conservative Catholic families out there that are almost oppressive. Oh, yeah, for their children. And they're facing these issues. And I want to speak to those people right now. I mean, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about possible a gay a young boy or young lesbian coming out in a Chicano environment. Are there particular challenges that the culture, aside from religion, that might influence their coming out process?
Well, absolutely. I think if their dad practices a toxic form of masculinity.
The machismo?
Yeah. But I do want to clarify that all cultures have toxic masculinities. Mm-hmm. We just happen to have a word for it.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. I really like that.
Very good.
Because Japanese culture is incredibly masculine and toxic in many instances, men towards women. Yes, right? But I don't know what their word is for that. White men are incredibly
Muslims.
I guess the word would be
are incredibly
Muslims. Yeah, of course. I guess the Caucasian version would be chauvinist, I guess, but not even that is
too tender.
I know it does.
That's what I like about machismo. It sounds like you're already a criminal. But when you say chauvinist, it's almost like, oh, is he French?
Yeah.
Oh, is he gay?
Yeah.
But no, that's a good point.
And that's what, and I even African American cultures in some of them, not all of them. I mean, but that's an interesting point. I think that what's not unique to Latinos or to Hispanics or to Chicanos is machismo. It's not unique. It's just that we have a name for it.
We have a name for it. That's why I said, well, it depends. If they're, performing a toxic form of masculinity, I try to steer away from machismo because it seems like only the men in our culture behave that way.
That's a very good point.
Because it has a word that's associated with it when it's like, no, the men in all of the cultures, there's men in all cultures that behave that way. We just don't know what the word is for that culture or that culture. But when you say machismo anywhere, pretty much in the world, people automatically know you're talking about Latino male behavior.
And I think modern pop culture has adapted a machismo.
There is a male dominance that would affect people coming out of the closet if you're young and coming out in a family like that.
Absolutely. I think that a lot of men in our present moment generally still behave that way, right? They're still very homophobic. And so if you're growing up in that atmosphere, for sure, there's barriers. On the flip side, I think a lot of young parents today have grown up in a more open world as far as gay is concerned, right? So there's commercials on TV and movies that have come out much more than when we were growing up, right?
For sure.
You would never see a commercial where two men are holding hands or doing.
None of us would, not when you were younger.
No. And so I think a lot of them have let that barrier down. And I see that sometimes, when I go out to events and stuff, young people will bring their parents, and their parents are in events that are primarily for the LGBTQ community, and they embrace their children. And I see that more today than when I was growing up.
And it's a beautiful thing.
It's a very beautiful thing. But I do know that there's still somewhere a kid in a household that's being terrorized by their parents, right? And we have to look back at that lineage. Where did those people grow up? And, so it's not going away. And I don't even think it's ever going to go away.
Right.
but I think it's gotten better.
Well, that's sort of like what we were talking about in the 70s, how we became complacent, and in the 80s with the gay movement, we became complacent. It's an ebb and flow. I think that there are periods of time that a particular group is being attacked, and we kind of wear those badges for that time being, and then things change, and we kind of put that away, and then we pick up another fight or wear another shield or some other form of that. In this particular case, because of the political environment that we're living in now, it seems like we're being attacked from the religious right, and even more moderate Republicans in terms of not just the LGBTQ people, in particular trans people, but also, like we had talked about, Latinos and Hispanics, and there is a great deal of fear there. So those are why I feel like we're kind of wearing these badges a little bit more proudly now, and we should, because historically that's worked for us. What does the movement look like in the future? What should we be working towards as a group? Not just the LGBTQ people, but Latinos within the LGBTQ environment.
I don't know, because there's so much division amongst us, right? And a lot of it is not just, a lot of it's economic.
Interesting. That's
Right?
another
In the
discussion.
LGBT side, the haves and the have-nots, right? For sure. I was having this conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and I said to him, I don't understand this attack on the trans community. I said, I just don't understand it. There's such a small portion of the demographics, no names, but he's a Trump supporter. And he started bringing up economics and stuff like that, right? And I was like, that's interesting. So he's done well. So he has this whole other outlook, right, on who belongs and who doesn't belong, but from an economic perspective, not really politically. He said, well, I don't understand why that, he says, I don't think it's okay that men are playing women's sports. Right. And I was like, it's so few. I said, and I really don't think that the women, that bothers them, because I played sports my whole life. And I was pretty good when I played in high school, but I grew up playing with my brothers. So I'm like, we already play with guys. What difference does it make? Right. Yeah. Like, that's why we tend to excel a little bit more, is because from an early age, we're competing against them. I was always competing with my brothers, right? So I just, this one just baffles me. And I think it's nothing more than a culture war.
Well, it is. And it's also a chum. They want us to fight over this particular issue. When I think that a few months ago, I saw a report, there was a team of female athletes, high school kids, and there was a trans athlete that was on the team, and they were cheering her on. They were not, but the thing about sports, particularly when you're young and able-bodied, is that it's a celebration of what you can do, and it's not so much in your head that this person next to you, it was born a male and now identifies as a female. It's more like they're working on doing the best that they can. It seems the parents and the politicians that are controlling the parents are able to kind of shine a spotlight on an issue that is really kind of a non-issue.
It really is, because if you think about the bullying that goes on in male sports, remember this incident not that long ago at NMSU?
Right.
Okay, so these are all supposedly heterosexual men, right, that are terrorizing each other in locker rooms. So, and that's okay?
Right. Because it's historic hazing. They're just boys being boys.
And it's male culture. That's okay.
Right.
Because they were born male.
Yeah.
Right.
So then you have this one person that's 0.00001% of the demographics, right, who wants to play volleyball or whatever with the women, and that's not okay. It's nonsensical to me. I don't even.
And going back to your, I'm sorry.
No. I just wanted to say that I think for me, the part of this equation is rooted in misogyny. And I think that when you watch a male who wants to be female, that's a derogatory thing. That's a terrible thing. Why would you want to be, Female.
Why? Do they mistreat women?
Yeah, right? Yeah. But on the flip side of that, when you see a young girl, say, in a movie who works with her father on the truck, they always think, yeah, Charlie's a good old girl, and that kind of thing.
Unless she's transgender.
Yeah. And then,
Right.
and then the transgender part is, why would anybody want to be female? Why would anybody want?
Or why would I think the ones that are in more danger are the females who want to be males.
Yeah.
So because masculinity becomes very dangerous, I think, when it leaves the male body.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're performing as a man, you're entering a space that's almost sacred to men. Right? You cannot be a real man. So think about it from the perspective of a lesbian. If you're a lesbian, or what they refer to as a lipstick lesbian, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, you're in Penthouse or whatever, right? Men are looking at you, and they're looking at those high heels and that long hair and those long painted nails. And they're ogling. They don't have a problem with it, no matter. Or two women kissing, right? Two feminine women kissing. That's like, whoa.
They fetishize that.
Right?
Yeah.
But two women kissing, one looks like a man. That's a big no-no. That's when men start to get really upset. Like they have stepped, that one that looks kind of like a boy has stepped into our realm. That is not okay. As long as you're two femmes, perfect.
Yeah. It seems to me that, but then again, how often does that happen in a regular male's life? You know what I mean? I think that the transgender community is, as we've said, so small and so vulnerable. And yet we've put them in the center of a divide that just doesn't make any sense.
We need to be reminded that there's a lot of discrimination within the LGBTQ community against transgender people.
Yes.
Like, this is not limited to the heterosexual community. I hear, in fact, that argument about men playing women's sports is a topic I hear a lot in the LGBTQ community. It seems to me that the trans community is the one that's putting up the fight right now.
Right.
They're the ones that are on the front line. They're the ones that are suing. They're the ones that are fighting for their rights, which are going to be our rights, right? And we're standing back here going along with these criticisms.
And they were there in the 1970s when we had the Stonewall riots.
They started it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now they're back in the center of all of this criticism, and they're still fighting, and we're kind of back here watching them and even joining in on this negative discussion about them, right? So that one has me baffled. Right. Trans issue has me baffled. I don't know. I have no idea why we...
The idea of identity in terms of our ethnicity, our culture, and our sexuality are truly an intersection. And while it is an individual choice, there are certain things that influence them. And I think that we covered a lot of that. So, Irma, I thank you very much for your time.
I wanted to ask one thing. If you were to say one thing to our young audience, to young people in our audience about being Latino and queer right now, what would be a good message for them if they're listening to you now?
I love you.
Oh,
I think that says it all.
perfect. I love it.
Very good.
I'm excited.
We love you.
Yo soy chicano, sí señor. Chicano soy, nada es mejor. Yo soy chicano, sí señor.
What an interesting conversation. I mean, growing up in El Paso my whole life, these are things that I've always been surrounded on, but I've never really contemplated. And Dr. Montelongo really brought everything into clear focus for me. What did you all think of the conversation?
What a great college professor to have. I would feel so welcomed in her class and so comfortable listening to what she has to say and hearing her point of view. I didn't feel like she spoke to us, so pedantically. She spoke to us with character and with honesty and with clarity. It helped me to understand a whole lot of things that I had only partially conceptualized or had a vague idea about?
Absolutely. Even the terminology, and like Izzy was saying, it was done in such a conversational tone that it makes you want to learn more. And I think that's truly the mark of a good professor. And certainly, there's a reason why she's so successful. But in terms of our theme, I was really kind of amazed as we were looking through these different identities and trying to kind of pick it apart. I came to the realization that in El Paso, the LGBTQ community is so enmeshed with the Latino community that, you can't pick it apart. It is simply a part of who we are. It makes us unique in the world. But at the same time, when you start to look at each of our individual identities within that, it's almost difficult to separate one from the other.
Yeah. And I would say, like, in these trying times, the LGBTQ community needs to harness that Chicano power and movement and, just strength to kind of push our message and get, not let ourselves be bullied by whoever we come across.
I also think that it was a good lesson, at least for me, to not allow myself to fall into that. Oh, we're separate because of being queer and that kind of thing. But for me, it solidified the fact that I have a stake in the Latino community, even though I'm queer, or because I'm queer and Latino.
And I have a feeling that even as further generations come after us, the definition of what it is to be Latino and queer is going to become even more clear because we're being pushed into a different realm politically and culturally. And like Dr. Montelongo talked about, that over time, we're eventually going to become the majority if all of the population, if all of the trends continue forward. And so it'll be an interesting way to see how our culture will impact the greater American culture. I mean, we already have taco trucks everywhere, so that has something to do with it. So we can take credit for that.
We created our own political identity as Queertino or
I love that.
Hispanic.
Gaytinos. I'm a Gaytino, but that sounds like a cocktail drink. It sounds like a cocktail. I'll have a Gaytino. And let me tell you, over the years, I've had many. Anyway, well, I think that was a very interesting conversation. Once again, it was a pleasure to have that with you two, Ceci, Izzy, and of course, Dr. Montelongo. So until next time, we say,
Agarren la onda, queers.
We'd love to hear from you. Email us at feedback@queeronda.com or visit our website and leave a comment. www.queeronda.com. That's www.queeronda.com.